Okay, I am starting this new series of podcasts based on this book called The Climate Connection, Climate Change and Modern Human Evolution. Obviously, modern human is the Homo sapiens, which essentially evolved in the during the Holocene in the last, let's say, 12,000 years. Started the agricultural revolution and technology, which has managed to create an unstable climate, which is why we talk so much about climate change now. But the book is more about the historical context in which climate evolution and human evolution have co-occurred, and what are the ancestors of the modern human that have been around during this climate change. Obviously, there is a long-term context to it. In the big history kind of framework, David Christian would suggest that to understand anything about humans, we have to go all the way back to Big Bang creation of matter from energy and hydrogen and heavier elements coming up to carbon and the essential elements of life like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, phosphorus, and whoever else you have. There should be another one. You can look it up. So just to look at the brief context in terms of the geologic timescale, there are many such figures which are fancier, but I'm going to use the figures from this book just to stay with it, and I'm not going to go into great details. I'm just going to make a series that is capturing the gist of it. The first chapter opens with an introduction to the whole problem of climate change connection to modern human, and obviously solar system started around 4.6 billion years ago, and we split the geological eons into Precambrian and Phanerozoic because major explosion of life happened here around 540 million years ago during the Cambrian, and everything before that is clubbed into Precambrian, and after that we have Phanerozoic, which is visible life. So Archean comes from Arches, which is the beginning, where we have the first evidences of life going back to something like 3.8 billion years ago. The timing keeps changing based on new evidences or controversies about older evidences. Proterozoic is early life, so that is where we have clear evidence of unicellular life with some radial symmetries, jellyfish-like things during the Ediacaran before the Cambrian explosion, where lots of new species, multicellular species, vascular plants evolved later on, and so on and so forth. So along the way, when you go back this far in time, continents have reconfigured, mountain building, changes in shelf areas of the ocean which are favorable for nutrient supply, upwelling, evolution of new species, colonization of land by marine species, and so on, and they lead to evolution of plants which drew down CO2 so much that there was snowball Earth episodes where much of the planet was glaciated. There have been 3 major glacial snowball Earth episodes along the way, and obviously life got more complex, and there have been mass extinction events along the way related to things like crashing of the meteorites or bolides. But as we know, the controversy about whether the meteorite crash at 65 million years caused the extinction of dinosaurs, or whether they went extinct several 100,000 years after the crash. The evidence for the crash exists in the Chicxulub comet in the Yucatan Peninsula following the Agassiz discovery of the iridium in the mountains of Italy, which indicated the crash first. So such kind of details exist, but just keeping in mind the geologic periods, we can zoom right into where the major part of the evolution into bipedalism, walking on two legs instead of four legs, happened, which is related to plate tectonics, presumably maybe Australia moving north and blocking the pathway between the Pacific and Indian Oceans, changing the character of the El Nino. If you don't know what El Nino is, you can look up my other podcasts, and led to aridification of East Africa. It was a lush green forest before about 3 to 5 million years ago, and the change in climate led to it being savannas and grasslands, which required animals to move further. Our ancestors, like gorillas and chimps and early hominids, to move faster and farther to find food or to run away from predators and so on. A lush green forest provides a lot of hiding places, escape routes, but in a savanna it's wide open and so on. So climate change since then also has included these major 100,000 year timescale glaciations, where there is a slow cooling drawdown of CO2 and methane and N2O, and rapid warming related to the ice albedo feedback, which I have talked about in other courses. And there have been several smaller scale, faster time scale changes as well, so-called marine isotopic stages. 6 here, last glacial maximum happened around 21,000 years ago. That ended with a hiccup in the Younger Dryas, which again I have discussed elsewhere. Led to Holocene with the fairly stable climate, except for the rapid cooling during the Younger Dryas around 11 to 12,000 years ago, and another smaller cooling around 8,250 years ago. Other than that, Holocene has been fairly mild in terms of the temperature anomalies with respect to some base period you can choose. Civilizations have gone extinct and so on, so we will continue to look at the details and look at how glacial, interglacial periods create unstable climates. In general, stable climate leads to a kind of a stabilization of evolutionary patterns as well. New niches evolve during climate perturbations, leading to new species which can evolve and use the new openings in temperature, humidity, shelf areas, etc., forests, vegetation changes, etc. But in a stable period, dominant species can control the evolution in some way by outcompeting the new ones that may be trying to arise, and so on. So there are details we will look at in terms of the Darwinian evolution, which looks at geologic timescales, natural selection, and so on. Whereas there are other so-called emergence evolution theories which talk about rapid evolutions that happen unpredictable and could be just a mutation. They could be developmental evolution, where, let's say, our cranium got bigger, brain got more cognitive, and so on, versus functional evolution, where, for example, freshwater species going into ocean or the other way, water species colonizing land, and so on and so forth. Okay, so those kinds of details are interesting, but main thing is to arrive to the Holocene, where all our ancestors have disappeared over time, and most of this happened in the last 135,000 years ago, the last ice age, which started around 135,000 years ago. There are reasons why the warming is fast and the cooling is slow, which we have discussed elsewhere. You can look it up in my other courses. And we have now evolved to create massive perturbations, almost like breaking the geological, biological thermostat of the planet. So where are we headed, and what it means in terms of climate change and human evolution and human adaptability to climate change and so on. So this is just the introductory chapter, so I will leave it here, and we will just look at the various stages of evolution. This topic is hot. Axel Timmerman, for example, keeps writing papers on how climate evolution has affected each of these stages in terms of migration out of Africa or colonizing of Asia versus Europe versus Americas and so on. So if you look at the Quaternary starting from the early stone tools around 2300,000 years, so this is in thousands of years, Homo erectus dispersal out of Africa. These things again keep being hypothesized and looked at in more details with new evidences emerging, new climate model simulations leading to new conclusions and so on. Wood javelins in Germany around 900,000 years ago, Homo erectus. So there is Floresiensis. I think in some of the earlier podcasts I referred to as Floriensis, which is wrong. Floresiensis is the Homo floresiensis. They survived out to 840,000 years ago. Neanderthals, Homo erectus in Japan at the time. Homo erectus disappears in China. And so you have lots of these stages along the way that we will look at in some details. As you can see, evidences emerge as we go forward. Coldest time of the last ice age was 21,000 years ago. Homo sapiens appear in the Americas somewhere in the 10 to 20,000 years ago. The so-called Clovids, I think, you can look it up. Younger Dryas cold spell I mentioned just happened here because of the ice dam over Lake Agassiz bursting and releasing a lot of fresh water onto the North Atlantic, where deep water sinks, the ocean global thermohaline circulation gets perturbed. If you don't know what that means, I have 4 podcasts on that you can look up. So Holocene, warm interval, and first agricultural begin 12,000 years ago and then 8,000 years ago in different parts of the planet. So Homo floresiensis disappears around here. Holocene warm interval that I already read. Short cold events around 8.2 kilo years that I mentioned. Aboriginal peoples inhabit Canadian Arctic, New Caledonia and Samoa. So Homo sapiens then reach various regions like the Pacific Island, Hawaii and Easter Island, and New Zealand. Along the way, there have been extinctions caused by humans, especially the megafauna and so on. So lots of fascinating details, but the main focus will be to look at how humans and climate have co-evolved, and obviously it's an interesting topic because it means something for our own future as well as we make these massive perturbations to climate now because of our technology and agricultural and other land use activities and emissions from fossil fuel burning and so on and so forth. And we can look at the end in terms of what it means for the future. Right? There are a lot of people looking at how humans are evolving along with the climate change, and there is a lot of evidences that as many species are going extinct, the so-called sixth mass extinction happening because of human activities, there are also adaptations happening on a very fast time scales in fish and birds and other species, maybe even in mammals, but we will see those kinds of details as we go forward. So should be fun. I'm just doing again this for my own edification because I love this topic, and I have looked at it in my own research in small parts, like how the evolution of Galapagos affected the El Nino potentially, because if El Nino change is related to bipedalism and modern human evolution, then Galapagos may have played a crucial role as well, and it's now a hotspot of biodiversity where Darwin had many of his epiphanies when the beagle was parked there for a few months. Okay, so we will try to build a story with this book, which I find very fascinating, and maybe you will enjoy it as well. Okay.